Okay, I'm here with Devin and Lyall. This is Thomas Jones for Leadership and Ministry class, and I'm interviewing a leader, young leader. So Devin, tell me about what's your name and how old are you?
My name is Devin Lyall, and I'm 35 years old.
35.
Yeah.
What's the name of your organization?
So I am the executive director of Wilkes Recovery Revolution, and we're a recovery community organization based out of North Wilkesboro, North Carolina.
All right. How long have you been in leadership?
So officially, I would say I've been in leadership since 2015 when we started working on building a nonprofit organization to support people with addiction. I would say that I probably took on leadership roles a long time before that in different capacities just through life, because that was just something I always was drawn to being more of a leader than a follower in a lot of situations. So
that's pretty good. That's pretty normal.
Yeah.
So in that, how did you get into leadership?
So I was drawn to leadership. I myself have my own lived experiences where I went through addiction and mental health, and came from being in a middle to upper class privileged family, great life, highly academic in my high school, and ended up getting addicted to opioids from an ankle surgery, and so that kind of took me down a spiraling path. When I came through that after a long time of battling it, I had this draw. I definitely think it's my higher power and that it's a God thing for me, but I had this thing inside of me where I felt like my life had been spared to be able to help other people that were in the same situation. And locally, we didn't have a whole lot of people that I was able to look up to that had been through the same thing, and so I felt like something needed to be done locally. People needed someone to give them some hope. They needed someone that they could depend on and hope, get resources and get answers from.
So nobody hired you to do this?
No. I was not hired to step into this work. When I started this work, I was doing it for absolutely nothing. I was probably spending more money than I was income than I was making, and I say that because family was having to support me because they felt like this was the right path for me to take. It was probably a good 2 years before I ever officially got on payroll, so yeah.
Well, so what are some of the challenges that you would say are come with being a leader?
So when I think about leadership and some of the things I've just had to go through on my own self-discovery, and I've had to take leadership trainings just to make sure I'm being the most effective leader that I can, but one of the big things I think about with leadership is for one, I have to take responsibility for myself and others, but that I have to admit anything that my shortcomings, anything I'm doing wrong, I have to be upfront about those and be able to recognize them, and that teaches other people to be able to recognize that in themselves. The other thing with leadership, so that's kind of taking responsibility. That's one of the things I think about. A leader has to take responsibility all the way around. Other people's, themselves, all of that. And the other thing is I have to be self-reflective. I have to think back, and I have to make sure that everything I'm doing is done with the best of intentions before moving forward. And so I have to do that on a constant daily basis, being self-reflective. I can't, that's not something that happened one time at the beginning of all this and stopped. I have to make sure that I'm continuing to do that to make sure I'm being the leader that other people need me to be, and that the main thing that I think about when I think about leadership, and I had this all backwards for a long time, is I used to think you created leaders, like that you invest in people and they become leaders. But what I have found is that everyone has leadership skills. I had to figure out what was blocking my ability to lead, and for me that was a lot of that baggage and addiction and all of those consequences. But But for other people, it might be as simple as they don't have the self-confidence to be leaders. And so investing in that, I think everybody has leadership skills. It's just figuring out how to tap into those and what to do with them,
Right.
you know, when you do have them. Challenges with leadership, I'll go back to that always seeking feedback for myself. So it's hard for me to take feedback. It used to be even harder than it is now, but understanding that feedback is a good thing. Like, I'm never going to improve, others are never going to improve, my staff is never going to improve if we don't seek feedback. And that feedback's just that, feedback.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what allows us to know if we're being effective, if I'm being effective. I also used to have a really hard problem with working with my staff and being able to say, hey, this is where you're not performing well, because I would feel like that was going to hurt their feelings or do, you know, or cause them harm. And my philosophy is do no harm ever. But what I realized is that if I don't do those reviews with them, if I don't call those things out, if we don't have the tough conversations, then I'm actually blocking their ability to lead, because I'm not investing in them. I'm not trusting that they're going to do what they need to do with the information that I have. I'm putting my own spin on it. I'm thinking because I say this that they're going to feel some type of way. But if I really want what's best for people, then I will step up and have those tough conversations.
So in the long run of it, you think that those tough conversations create a happier staff?
Yeah, I do. And I would have not, it took me a couple years to figure that out. It's probably just been in the last 2 that I figured that out. And that was through trial and error of realizing that I wasn't doing anybody justice by not helping them move forward. And if you know, if there was that blocking point, then I needed to have that tough conversation. So definitely, yeah.
So how many staff do you have?
We have 16 right now.
Okay.
Yeah, 16 staff. For several years it was just a small group of us. There was about 5 of us, but that has grown significantly in the last 2 years. And that's where a lot of this having to adapt and learn and make sure I'm investing in my own leadership so that I'm doing the best that I can for other people has become even more important.
So in bouncing off the challenges, what are some of the rewards you received as being a leader?
So the rewards are getting to watch people get better, getting to watch my staff grow, getting to see the community get better because we're working together and not in silos, because we realize that everybody's got leadership potential. And so community, the people that we serve, just getting to see their lives change and get better, and then become their own leaders in some capacity. And then the staff, that growth that happens on the other side of those tough conversations, on the other side of that feedback. I think about just when I started shifting in staff meetings, me saying, you know, I wasn't clear when I asked for this to happen, and accepting my part, how big that shifted, them being willing to step up and express their part in it and really think through that. Like, everybody take responsibility for whatever part they own, no more, no less, you know, just that.
Well, you know, I've watched you over the years, and I know that you have developed this whole organization just out of the mind of Devin Lyall.
Yes.
You know,
not only my mind. There's a lot of people that contribute to those
I understand
goals.
it. I understand.
Yeah.
But you had to develop policies. You had to develop all the things that have created the structure and created the mission, all of that. And so, and you've had a team to work with you on that. But it's you've had to kind of steer the ship through that. So that's awesome. What is the most difficult decision you ever had to make?
My most difficult decision, so when I hire people, it's typically people, we're in a small rural community, and so it's typically people that have been brought up through our recovery community, and people that I've known, and people that have been drawn to the work like I originally was. And so some of my hardest times have probably been having to let people go because they weren't producing results, and they weren't taking feedback in a positive manner, and they weren't, you know, becoming culturally competent and really having the level of compassion that we expect out of people here. And there's a fine balance there with that of us having to make sure we're supporting them, because everyone we hire are individuals with lived experiences. So making sure that we've given them time to practice their own self-care and do the work that we expect them to do if they're not succeeding. And then knowing when that time to draw the line is and have that tough conversation and let somebody go that has been a part of the organization for a long time. So those have been some of the harder calls.
Sure. So in pulling it together, what are some of the future plans and goals you have?
So future plans and goals, it's funny we're talking about leadership, because part of what I want to do for my staff is get them some leadership training. We're actually looking at writing some of that into grants, and outside of myself, like a contracted trainer that focuses on leadership, because I've had the opportunity to do some of that self-development, whereas not everybody on the team has. And then we're expanding programming, and that gets hard because we know what needs to be done out in the community. We see it on a daily basis, but making sure that programs are sustainable. Like, regardless, me having a gut feeling and saying I know that these people need housing, we have the ability to purchase a building. That it can't just stop there. Like, we have to think through that whole process, and sometimes that's hard for someone with a brain like mine that wants an immediate solution to really think through the processes. But we're looking at continuing to expand. We're working on our strategic plan for 2022. We've been having workshops and doing some systems mapping and seeing where the barriers are and seeing what we know needs to happen and try to move those things forward. So of course, program expansion, continuing to build some capacity behind the programs that we already have is important so that they are sustainable. And then trying to figure out where we're most needed and where we need to step up, and sometimes, as a leader, where we need to fall back. So, you know, just trying to weigh all that out.
I had another question that came to my mind, because mainly because I'm familiar with the community and what you have to deal with. How do you deal with kickback from the community and what you do? Because that has to do with your leadership capacity and abilities as well.
Yeah, so that's an important question. So one thing I've always been told and taught and learned over the course of this is to read my audience and to always try to find something that they can relate to. And so sometimes I'm speaking to a crowd that may not understand the same lingo, even me telling my story may not click with them. So trying to find a way that they can relate to the realities of whatever it is. You know, if we're speaking about addiction, sometimes people, you know, there's stigma related to that and they think it's a moral deficiency and there's struggles there. So finding something that they can relate back to on a personal level has always been really helpful in making that shift. And then at the end of the day, I try to own my own truth and know my own truth and hope that standing out in the light versus being tucked back in the shadows, like a lot of people have been forced to be, will pay off in the end. And it's not always an instant thing, but it has, you know, over the years, just being willing to stand up and tell my story and be proud of my story has changed some hearts and minds. So
it's a journey, not a sprint.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And I don't expect that journey to ever stop.
Well, Devin, I appreciate your time, and I thank you for your heart and your desires, and in looking from the outside in, watched all the things that you've accomplished so far. And from our initial conversation back several years ago, you went well beyond what we talked about, and it's been a great thing. I'm really
thank you.
Blessed to be a part of it, a small part of it. You know, it's a great thing.
That's what it takes. It takes a village. I've always said. I mean, yes, I'm aware of what I have put into it, but it couldn't have all been done without, you know, so many different working pieces. And that's something else about leadership, is knowing that I can't I'm not the one all do all, get everything done. That there's times even I need help, and that there's times that I have to seek that help. So
And there's times that you have to commit to a lot of self-care.
yes, oh yes.
Well, thank you, Devin, and I
You're
appreciate the
welcome.
time. And this has been a conversation with Devin Lyall, and looking forward to future great things happening in the future. And I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you and all your work. Thank you.